Hey, everybody. And, 9 p.m. live. In any event, been a long day. I'm tired. And the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, continues to rage all around us. So I imagine folks are watching that, or I imagine a lot of the folks who would otherwise watch this are, in fact, watching the DNC. It's the second to last day, and there should be some pretty, I don't know, if you like speeches, pretty good speakers. That being said, I do want to talk about one thing which happened the other night, and everybody seemed to lose their mind. And I think it's important that we clarify this. AOC gave her 60-second speech, as everybody was calling it. AOC was not actually given a 60-second speaking slot at the DNC. She was asked to be the seconder of Bernie Sanders' nomination. So normally, in any convention setting, are you watching the DNC tonight? Dorian asks. He says Warren is tonight. Warren, I like Warren a lot. I don't really care about watching speeches, honestly. I'll go into my philosophy on that in a second. I just want to explain the AOC thing. It's really important that people understand this. Whenever somebody is nominated for an office, it requires, generally speaking, under parliamentary rules or under little d democratic procedures, it requires a nomination and a second. Now, depending on your rules, the person making the nomination and the person making the second may get the opportunity to explain why they're nominating their candidate and why they're seconding that candidate. So AOC was not given one of the actual speaking slots at the DNC. I think it was sort of weird of them to bill nominators and seconders as speeches, but okay, fine. They do actually get to talk and they're on the scheduled agenda, but really this is about the nomination of Bernie Sanders. When Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez made her nomination of Bernie Sanders, one, that's the reason it was a short speech, because it wasn't a speech, it was a 60-second nominating statement. And then when she nominated Bernie Sanders for president which was the entire point of giving her that speaking slot in the first place, it was certainly not unexpected, and it was not a non-endorsement of Joe Biden. As you may or may not be aware, she publicly endorsed Joe Biden immediately after he won the nomination for president. Now, we might ask, why was Bernie Sanders even being nominated, given that everybody knew the outcome of the race? And what about all the other folks who ran? Well, Bernie Sanders happens to have a bunch of delegates at the convention. So unless Bernie Sanders refuses, well, honestly, it's sort of out of his control at this point. Like, anybody from the floor who's a pledged delegate to Bernie Sanders can rise to nominate him. So not having a high-powered nominator and not having it worked into the agenda as it is sort of just opening the door for a chaotic free-for-all of who's going to nominate Bernie Sanders of his many delegates, and a wasted opportunity for making the case about why people might want to see a Bernie Sanders presidency, because he would have then thrown away the capacity to choose a spokesperson for his nomination. So that is why AOC spoke. That is why she had the amount of time she had. That is why she said the things that she said. And really, nobody should be flipping out about this at all. From everything I've seen on both the, progressive left and the centrist and the centrist establishment wing, pretty much everybody, every leader, every organizer, everybody on every spectrum is coming together to defeat the threat that is Donald Trump. Donald Trump said today, it was reiterated today, that he's always been, when asked about whether or not he would accept the outcome in November, he basically, his press secretary, the president has always been clear that he'll wait and see and decide in the aftermath. Now, the aftermath sort of implies that there'll be some sort of conflict, but, I don't know a single person who reasonably is sitting this one out, right? And I know a lot of people who are like, I'll never vote for Biden, so on and so forth. Donald Trump is doing our job for us in his complete brazen attempt to steal this election. So, yeah, let's not try and hype up some sort of disunity in the Democratic Party. There's unity within and without the Democratic Party at this moment in time to defeat Donald Trump. So, to put that out there. Now to get to Dorian's question about whether I'm watching the DNC, the answer is no, and it is because I've seen politicians speak for like a decade, and they all pretty much say the same thing, and it's never anything particularly interesting. And so, look, if you want to watch politicians talk, I think that's good on you. Certainly, when I ran for office, when I do run for office, I'm on the state committee, as folks probably know. One of the things we'll be talking about in just a second. I'm asked to give speeches, but, to explain myself and explain why I'm running and the things I would like to do in those offices. So those sorts of speeches can be important. It puts folks on the record, and we'll talk about that as well in a second. But for me to just listen to people reiterate all of the political and economic points, which I've understood for a long time, and honestly, to have them just repeat the things that have been said and are already battle tested, it's nothing new. It can be inspirational, but I sort of already know, like, I'm in it. Like, I've already dedicated my time to doing that work. So if folks want to watch the DNC, of course, no aspersion, but it's just, I don't care. Let's see what we got here. All right, there are a bunch of questions. Ben, any chance you could help me put together an NYC phone bank squad for Biden to work in Wake County? Yes, sure, let's talk about it. I've got a bunch of phone banks I'm supposed to be working on. Michael Kaplan, I don't know why people are upset. National polls all indicate that Cortez is massively unpopular and his support is a weight around Biden's candidacy. But other people think she doesn't support him than that she does. I'd be curious to see those national polls because I don't know if that's true. I think she has pretty good positives, but certainly Bernie does. Dorian Key, AOC said she wouldn't be in the same party as Biden. AOC, Dorian, you know this better than anybody else. You actually look to parliamentary monarchies as an example of good governance. So in most systems, certainly in any true multi-party proportional representative democracy, AOC would not be in the same party as Joe Biden. She'd be like a Green or maybe a what do they call them? The Liberals. The Liberals are more left than Labor, right? Whatever it is, she'd be in like the lefty fringe party that forms a coalition government with somebody. She wouldn't be in the main centrist party. I don't think there's anything controversial about that at all. In any other country, there would be a multi-party democracy, and people like AOC would probably not be in the Democratic Party. That's fine. Steve Kramer, how do you feel about the DSA opinion on Israel? I don't know what you mean by the DSA opinion on Israel. Do you mean the one question that they put out the other day of barring people from going to Israel, or asking whether people would self-isolate, I guess, from going to Israel? That I have been fairly clear about on the internet, I think is gross and anti-Semitic, and just they ultimately came out and were like, well, what we really mean is like lobbyist sponsor trips. And yeah, I don't think that politicians should be taking lobbyist sponsored trips to other countries so that they can see a manufactured version of that country put together by that government, because that's basically the definition of propaganda. But, I'm Jewish, and if I were going to run for office and I were going to seek DSA's endorsement and they asked me, would you refrain from ever going to Israel? My answer would be, no. Are you crazy? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I have relatives over there. I don't care what your nonsense, whatever your political views are, they should have zero bearing on the fact that, like, I have relatives who I, love and would like to see who happen to live in Israel. And what, now I'm barred from, participating in, weddings and holidays in Israel because you've got some problem. Like, obviously, there's a big political question about what's going on in the Middle East and the way that Israel interacts with the Palestinians. But to bar people from going to a country, they should just be asking people, then bar people from going to China, bar people from going to Russia. Like, there's a lot of terrible countries that have terrible, terrible governments. And yet that's not really a reflection on the fact that people still have lives and those lives are intertwined with other people from around the world. That's a nonsensical position. But that being said, they were forced to come out and clarify that. And yeah, so they walked that back. Dorian Key, what happens the night of November 3rd or morning of November 4th when Trump declares the election fraudulent and refuses to accept the result? What needs to help and what measure Dems are preparing for that? Now, that's a great question. And that could be a whole, honestly, I've been thinking about that, and I don't really have any good answers for that at the moment. It really requires more thought. Like, I think protests, real protests, like marching down to Washington and making it completely impossible for the government to do its job. Like what we're seeing in Belarus, a general strike where everybody refuses to work, just ridiculous amounts of protesting and civil disobedience all over the country, just sustained and continuous until he leaves office, to grind this country to a halt, to make it so uncomfortable and untenable for that situation to exist, that it simply cannot happen. That even Trump's supporters, the ones who actually have power in government and in business, they will be incapable of backing him for the complete destruction of, not destruction, but the complete incapacity of their lives and their businesses to proceed in such a state of dissatisfaction and protest. That is the first step. What happens insofar as the disposition of law enforcement or maybe the military to quell these protests? That is another question. And then we quickly and rapidly escalate into, do we have a civil war? Dorian, liberals are the conservative party in Oz. Well, I was talking about the UK. Liberals are considered center-right in every country, not the US. Okay, so then she might be in Labor, but not, and like Biden might be in the Liberal Party, right? Okay. Labor is more left than liberals. Okay, so there you go. But the point is that they have a multi-party system. Dorian, can you finally talk about Belarus now? Belarus, since you've blown it off for a week. Look, what's happening in Belarus is exactly what's going to happen in the United States if Donald Trump loses this election and tries to hold on to power. I sort of just addressed that, but I am very heartened to see people stand up to security force in the way that the people of Belarus have, and I don't know if there's really much more to be said. Because I might have blown it off for a week, but that's because there's so much stuff going on locally, and because I have all of these other things that I have to know about and think about, that I have not invested a substantial amount in looking at these overseas situations. Although I think that it probably warrants attention by every American because we might be in a similar situation soon. Do you think Putin minor Lukashenko is finished? I actually do. Yeah, I don't think he'll be able to hold on if the scale of the protests that are currently being undertaken continue. If Belarus turns democratic and pro-West, don't you think Russia will intervene militarily like in Georgia? Yeah, I do. Or like in the Ukraine, more likely. They'll like do subterfuge and such. I think what will happen is I think it'll be very careful to look at how that government forms if Belarus does go democratic, to see how the maneuvering for who ends up taking power actually goes down. And I think you might have a Ukraine type situation. Certainly, it'd be better if Biden were president during that transition than if Trump were, because obviously Trump aids and abets and suckers dictators. Sox has 23 approve, 37 disapprove. I assume you mean AOC when you say Sox. Yeah. Dorian Key, you realize Belarus should start the end of Putin, right? It could be huge. I don't know. Why do you say that? Why do you say that? Putin has such a strong lock on Russia. If Russia invades Belarus, is the West going to do shit? It'll be like Ukraine. It's not going to be some sort of open invasion. Putin is a bit more savvy than that. So it won't be something already, even for members of NATO, they're like, well, if what happened in Ukraine happened to a member of NATO, does that constitute, an invasion? It's kind of unclear. There were unmarked soldiers. There was a lot of disinformation campaigning, and it looked like they was dressed up to look like militias. So I think it's quite difficult, and Putin's probably gotten better at concealing things than he was originally. Now, in any event, I mentioned two things that I really just want to touch on quickly. The first is when we were talking about the DNC, about how important it is for delegates to have their voice. We were talking about why Bernie Sanders was ultimately elected. Not elected, ultimately nominated at the convention, even though he had no chance of winning, because folks otherwise would be clamoring to nominate him. And you want to have an orderly process that allows the best advocates for Sanders to say their piece as far as a campaign is concerned. And so that's sort of generally how it goes down. You get to pick your nominators. But insofar as the actual platform of the party, the delegates have a hand in that. And one of the pieces of news that came out, which is somewhat disheartening, is that the Democratic Party did not add to its platform a plank about removing subsidies for fossil fuels. Now, this is annoying because I think most Democrats can get on board with the idea that, one, there's tremendous wealth inequality. Two, we should be raising taxes on the billionaires, even if it's just a little bit. Three, climate change is a tremendous, maybe the problem of our age. And four, cutting subsidies to fossil fuels accomplishes all of those objectives in one fell swoop. And there's no reason that we should subsidize an industry that is really so wealthy and so profitable as it is. So it was originally thought that they would be adding this plank because they produced a platform that was in favor of fossil fuel subsidies. But it turns out that that was a mistake and that they had released a draft which was not intended for application and was not passed. This is a real shame, and ultimately Biden and Harris have both committed to the idea of eliminating subsidies for fossil fuels. So it's in the presidential platform. Why does the party platform have a problem with it? In any event, this takes us to sort of the second component, which is that while the party platform has been written by the delegates, the stance that the Democratic Party takes over the next couple of years will be largely influenced by the Democratic National Committee members. And those folks are actually being elected in their various states by their Democratic state committees this year. So in September, very likely, as a Democratic state committeeman in New York State, I'll get to vote on DNC members. And let me just tell you, I'm not going to be voting for anybody who's not in favor of removing fossil fuel subsidies. We do, even though it's super unfortunate and kind of ridiculous, given the stances of the presidential and vice presidential candidates, even though that was not included in the platform, there will be opportunities to push the Democratic Party in that direction and have the Democratic Party make statements and take positions on that in the future. So I just wanted to let folks know, or like to reveal a little bit about like how these machinations work and where the next sort of step in that in that fight comes. And it comes with the DNC members and making sure that we have DNC members who are on board with actual good policy. Michael Kaplan, you slipped into a Bernie accent when you said millionaires and billionaires. It's just repetition. Repetition really makes a difference. When you hear it said one way enough times, plus I'm from Brooklyn, so that might have a little bit to do with it. But in any event, I don't know. That basically covers everything I wanted to talk about today. I'm pretty tired, so hey, Simon, how's it going? I think I'm going to call it for the evening unless there's more comments. I want to thank everybody who tuned in. A lot of good comments and questions tonight. And, DNC still going. Convention's still going. And there's one more night tomorrow. So check it out. Tomorrow you'll get your presidential and vice presidential candidates. All right, then. Until tomorrow at 9, I'll see you later.